This is the story of Rumpelstiltskin. Once upon a time, new biz dev comes to a client and claims that they have developers that can spin code into gold very quickly. The client is very happy with this, so they lock the developers away in a tower and demand that they spin enough code into gold to fill the entire room by tomorrow morning. The devs start to lose hope. No way they could spin that much code into gold in a single night. Suddenly, out of nowhere, something appears in the room. It's Octocat! Octocat tells the devs that she'll spin the codes they need into gold in exchange for a bottle of Soylent. The devs agree to the deal and make the trade. Octocat gets to work right away, spinning codes into gold almost instantaneously. The next morning, the client finds a solid gold landing page in the tower and is very impressed by it. So they lock the developers in an even larger tower and demand that they spin even more codes into more gold, enough to fill the entire room again by tomorrow morning. The devs accept their limitations and all agree that it's impossible to do such a task that quickly. But then, suddenly out of nowhere, Octocat appears again and is willing to spin enough codes into gold for them for 2 bottles of Soylent. The devs gladly agree to this deal and make the trade, and Octocat gets back to work, spinning codes into gold almost instantaneously, just like she did last time. The next morning, the client finds an even larger solid gold landing page, and is even more impressed by it, so they lock the developers in the largest tower they own, and promise that they'll sign on the dotted line and be their agency on record if they can spin enough codes to fill the entire room with gold. The devs give up. They don't even begin to try something that's even more impossible than the last time. But then, Octocat appears suddenly out of nowhere again, and says that she'll fill the room up this time for 3 bottles of Soylent. But the devs don't have any more Soylent to give. So Octocat says not to worry, she'll spin all the codes they need overnight if the devs promise to provide updates to their Gumby framework. The devs agree to the deal, and Octocat works harder than she ever did before, turning tons of codes into tons of golds. The next morning, the client finds the largest solid gold landing page they've ever seen and are super impressed, so they sign on the dotted line and are now officially their agency on record. Later that night, the devs are out celebrating together when Octocat comes back. She wants to see the Gumby framework code, but the devs haven't worked on any of it. When she finds this out, she becomes very irritated, but finally consents to give up her claim to Gumby updates if the devs can guess how all the code she gave them works within 3 days. The devs take a hard look at the code that Octocat gave them, and they make guesses about how it may work, but they all fail to understand it. But before the final night, they wander onto GitHub.com searching for her and see her as she hops around her servers and sings, "The documentation for this code is all right here." When the Octocat comes back the next morning to claim her Gumby updates, assuming that the devs hadn't figured out how the code works, the devs simply tell her how all the code works, and the Octocat loses her temper and disappears forever. The end.